He was convinced that his wife had betrayed him with his own biological father. He insisted that their first daughter was not his flesh and blood, but the product of an incestuous relationship between his wife and his father. That suspicion smoldered for 10 years, until one day it finally exploded. Along a highway, 2 blood-red suitcases appeared. Inside were the dismembered remains of a woman. Beneath the body parts lay a scrap of paper with a crudely written message: "The price of a promiscuous woman." 7 days later, the killer was captured. What he confessed sent chills through the entire task force, not only because of the brutality of the crime, but because as police dug deeper into his past, they discovered that the family relationship behind it all was truly insane. So what really happened? Let's find out. On December 20th, 2006, along Provincial Road 101 in Suzhou, Anhui Province, 2 blood-red suitcases, 2 black plastic bags, and a child's backpack were found discarded by the roadside. A woman traveling into the city noticed them and, driven by curiosity, walked closer. As she approached, a strong, rancid odor hit her nose and she instinctively stepped back. The man accompanying her showed no hesitation. He boldly opened one of the suitcases. In that instant, he saw a scene he would never forget for the rest of his life. Inside was the upper half of a human body, headless, with no arms or legs. The chest area bore 2 deeply sunken, blood-soaked cavities that were horrifying to behold. He immediately called the police. Officers arrived quickly and carefully removed the upper torso. Beneath the body, they discovered a piece of paper bearing 5 handwritten Chinese characters: "The price of a promiscuous woman." When police opened the black plastic-wrapped fabric bag and the child's backpack, they found the lower half of the body, both arms, both legs, and the victim's internal organs. After reassembling all the recovered body parts, forensic examiners confirmed that the victim was female. However, her head, breasts, and genital area were still missing. In a side pocket of the fabric bag, police also found a 1-inch black and white photograph. The photo showed a man in his early 30s with short cropped hair, thick eyebrows, and large eyes. In addition, officers discovered several blood-stained sets of women's clothing and some children's clothes. Based on the deliberate destruction of key female body parts, such as the breasts and genital area, police initially suspected the case was related to a crime of passion or sexual assault. The photograph of the man found at the scene immediately raised serious suspicion. Why would a photo of an unrelated man be left among the remains? Given the extreme cruelty of the crime, police quickly formed a special task force and launched an urgent investigation. The task force focused first on the photograph, entering it into the local resident database for comparison. The results produced 26 individuals who resembled the man in the image. Officers simultaneously dispatched teams to canvass the crime scene area while conducting thorough background checks on all 26 suspects. However, most leads went nowhere. Many of the men were single, and others had solid alibis, having stayed home in the days leading up to the crime, with neither time nor motive to commit murder. Meanwhile, the crime scene investigation yielded a new clue. Witnesses reported that earlier that morning, a man driving a taxi had dumped the suitcases and items by the roadside. However, due to heavy morning fog, the witnesses were unable to see his face clearly or note the license plate number. The task force immediately announced a reward of 100,000 yuan for information leading to the identity of the man who dumped the body and the man in the photograph. At the same time, to identify the victim, police publicly released details of the case through the media, displayed the clothing found at the scene, and encouraged the public to come forward with any information. 4 days after the reward was announced, the case took a dramatic turn. An elderly man working at a gas station contacted the task force and reported that the man in the photograph was a taxi driver who frequently refueled at his station. The fact that he was a taxi driver matched the witness account of the body being dumped by a cab driver, immediately raising alarm within the investigation team. Police quickly confirmed the man's identity. His name was Zhu Daping, born in 1971, originally from Baishan Village, Lankan Town, Yongqiao District, Suzhou City. In 2004, due to ongoing conflicts with his parents and his younger brother's family, he moved with his wife Kai Honglian and their 2 daughters from Baishan village to Suzhou to live. After relocating, Dapeng became acquainted with a 32-year-old woman named Zhou Qin. Before long, he began an affair with Zhou Qin, who was already married. To make it easier to meet her, he even rented a separate room outside his home. As for his wife, Honglian, she had been working in Hangzhou. However, after returning from Hangzhou to Suzhou on December 18th, no one ever saw her again. The homeroom teacher of their eldest daughter also reported that in late October 2006, Dapeng completed the paperwork to transfer his eldest daughter, Zhu Nan, out of her school. After that, neither teachers nor classmates ever saw the child again. Their 3-year-old younger daughter also vanished without a trace. Zhu Dapeng had both a wife and a mistress, while his wife had disappeared under mysterious circumstances. All of this aligned perfectly with the task force's assessment that this was a crime driven by a romantic or emotional motive. Police quickly listed him as a primary suspect and preliminarily determined that the dismembered female body was very likely Honglian. On December 26, 2006, the task force located the hiding place of Dapeng and his mistress, Zhou Qin. Although Dapeng was not present at the time, police detained Zhou Qin and brought her in for questioning. At first, Zhou Qin was extremely evasive. She claimed she knew nothing and insisted she had never met anyone named Dapeng. However, the task force soon uncovered evidence that exposed her lies. Inside the room, police not only found intimate photographs of Zhou Qin and Dapeng together, but also discovered a suspicious handwritten note. After forensic analysis, investigators confirmed that the handwriting on this note matched the handwriting on the note found at the crime scene. Both were written by the same person. Faced with the evidence, Zhou Qin could no longer deny the truth. She admitted that Dapeng had written both notes and confessed everything she knew. According to Zhou Qin, on December 20th, 6 days earlier, Dapeng had come to see her and confronted her directly, telling her that he had killed his wife, Honglian, and wanted her to flee with him. Hearing this, Zhou Qin was terrified. She dared not run away with a murderer. Panicking, she made excuses, hurriedly removed the necklace Dapeng had given her, stuffed it into his hands as travel money, and urged him to flee on his own. When his mistress refused to go with him, Dapeng did not press the issue and instead traveled alone to Shanghai. Because he did not disclose his exact location in Shanghai, the task force urgently dispatched 3 police officers overnight to Shanghai and notified local authorities to assist in the search. At the same time, the remaining officers in Suzhou continued their investigation and eventually located the rental room shared by Zhu Dapeng and his wife. Inside, they discovered large amounts of blood stains, a blood-covered pig slaughtering knife, a nylon rope, and pieces of human tissue that had not yet been disposed of. The task force confirmed this location as the primary crime scene. Combined with the disappearance of both daughters, investigators concluded that the 2 children had also been murdered. On December 27th, the 7th day since the crime occurred, the team in Shanghai captured Dapeng hiding at a construction site. At the time of his arrest, he appeared unusually calm, offered no resistance, and obediently accompanied police back to Suzhou. After returning to Suzhou, investigators interrogated Dapeng. He did not deny anything, and openly admitted that the victim was his wife, Honglian. He confessed that both his wife and his 2 daughters had been killed by his own hands. But what he said next sent a chill through everyone in the room. He stated that the greatest regret of his life was that he had not had the chance to kill his own father. At that moment, everyone was baffled. A cheating husband who murdered his wife and children, and yet was obsessed with killing his father? What kind of hatred existed between him and his father? To understand the meaning behind that statement, the task force began investigating the past of Dapeng and his father. What they uncovered revealed that this deep resentment had been planted decades earlier. After Dapeng was born, his parents were busy with work, so he was raised by his paternal grandparents. From an early age, he was excessively indulged. Whatever he wanted, he got. Over time, this upbringing shaped him into someone selfish, arrogant, and unable to distinguish right from wrong. When he was 5 or 6 years old, after his parents had a second child, they brought him back to live with them. His father, Ju Fu, was an elementary school teacher with a strict personality. Confronted with his son's bad habits, he imposed many rules. What Dapeng found most unbearable was having to give way to his younger brother. In contrast, the younger child had been raised directly by the parents and was well-behaved, naturally earning more affection from their father. Ju Fu was always gentle and patient with the younger son, but toward Dapeng he was quick to scold and sometimes even beat him. Under this unequal treatment, Ju Dapeng's personality became increasingly twisted and extreme. He firmly believed that his father favored his younger brother and had never truly loved him. In 1993, under his father's arrangement, 22-year-old Dapeng married his high school deskmate, Honglian. After the wedding, he went to work far from home and only returned to the village for a few days during the Lunar New Year. His wife remained behind in their hometown. In 1996, while Dapeng was working away from home, their eldest daughter, Ju Nan, was born. After 3 years of marriage, this should have been a joyful event. Instead, the reality was the opposite. Not only was he unhappy, he was furious, convinced that the child's birth was the result of his wife's infidelity. The reason was that after the marriage, when Honglian failed to conceive for a long time, Dapeng went to see a doctor. The doctor told him that he had problems with his vas deferens and was incapable of reproduction. Combined with rumors spread by neighbors claiming that the child was born from an illicit relationship between his wife and his father, Dapeng became absolutely convinced that Honglian and his father had engaged in an improper relationship and that this child was the result. In reality, Dapeng later underwent another medical examination and learned that he was not completely infertile. His sperm simply had a low survival rate. Even so, he stubbornly refused to accept the truth and continued to insist that the child was not his. After concluding that the child was not biologically his, Dapeng completely lost control. He repeatedly confronted his wife, demanding to know whether she truly had an affair with his father and whether their daughter was really his. Faced with his accusations, Honglian did not respond directly. She only said coldly, "If beating me or yelling at me makes you feel better, then go ahead." To Ju Dapeng, those words sounded like an admission. But we must not forget, this is only his side of the story. Honglian is gone. The dead cannot defend themselves. Even if she truly said those words, we cannot know whether they were spoken in anger or in utter despair. The truth may well have been buried beneath Dapeng's obsession. From that point on, he developed deep resentment toward the father who he believed had cuckolded him. The relationship between father and son deteriorated rapidly. He even came to hate his mother, believing that if his father and wife were having an affair, then his mother must have known and failed to stop it, making her complicit as well. In Dapeng's eyes, his parents had wronged him in many other ways and consistently favored his younger brother. For example, before Dapeng got married, his father had promised to buy a sewing machine for his wife. But years passed, and the promise was never fulfilled. When Dapeng asked why, his father bluntly replied that even if he chose not to buy it, there was nothing Dapeng could do about it. One year, the village was hit by flooding, and Dapeng stored his electric fan at his younger brother's house. After the water receded, his wife went to retrieve it, but his sister-in-law refused to return it. Honglian asked Dapeng's father to mediate. Instead, his father told the sister-in-law, "Give that old fan back to your sister-in-law. Tomorrow, I'll buy you a new one." What Dapeng found most unbearable was the stark contrast in how his parents treated their grandchildren. They doted on his brother's son, but were cold and indifferent toward his daughters. When his eldest daughter, Junan, was 4 years old, he left her in his mother's care. Once, the child developed a fever of 104 degrees Fahrenheit, yet his mother did not take her to see a doctor and simply ignored it. When Dapeng found out, he was furious and called to argue with his mother, accusing her of favoritism and of not caring about her own granddaughter. His mother shot back that he never sent money, so how was she supposed to pay for medical care? Meanwhile, whenever his brother's son had even a slight cough or fever, the grandparents panicked, looked after him constantly, and frequently slipped him money. As time passed, the conflict between Da Peng, his wife, and his parents grew increasingly severe. Eventually, in 2004, he moved his wife and children to Suzhou. After arriving in Suzhou, Da Peng enrolled in a driving school, planning to get his license and work as a taxi driver. It was at the driving school that he met his mistress, Zhou Qin, who was 2 years younger than him. In his eyes, she was prettier than his wife and loved him more deeply. Once, when he borrowed money from Zhou Qin, even though her financial situation was also modest, she did not hesitate to lend him 10,000 yuan. She never demanded that he spend money on her. This convinced Da Peng that Zhou Qin truly loved him. More importantly, in his mind, Zhou Qin possessed a quality he desperately craved. She had given birth to a son. Not having a son was a deep source of shame for Da Peng. Many people in the village mocked him for it, saying his family line would end with him. This only drove his already extreme personality further into obsession, making him desperate for Zhou Qin to give him a son of his own. He confessed his affair to his wife and proposed divorce. Honglian, of course, refused. Bitterly, she warned him that if he dared to divorce her, she would publicly expose his affair and make sure he could never hold his head up in public again. From that point on, their marriage fell into complete emotional ice. It can be said that everything described above only deepened Da Peng's hatred toward his parents and his wife. But what happened next was the true trigger that ignited his long-simmering resentment and planted the seed of murder. Although he ultimately failed to kill his father, he did kill his wife and children. In 2003, Zhu Dapeng's younger daughter was born. After her birth, the relationship between husband and wife improved significantly. Because his wife had stayed by his side throughout the pregnancy, he was certain that this younger daughter was biologically his. His relationship with his parents also softened. From time to time, he brought his wife and children back to visit them, sharing family meals with his parents and his younger brother's family. But at the dinner table, his father once again showed clear favoritism, constantly placing meat into his grandson's bowl while remaining cold toward Da Peng's 2 daughters. This behavior reinforced Da Peng's long-held belief that his father favored his brother's family, pushing his thinking further into extremism. In his mind, everything came down to one thing. His sister-in-law had given birth to a son, while he had only daughters. Later, his father asked him to drive his sister-in-law into the city the next day. However, Da Peng had already promised a neighbor a ride and used the excuse that there was not enough room in the car to refuse. Such a trivial matter ignited a fierce argument between father and son. Da Peng believed the neighbor had always treated him well and had even lent him money during difficult times, so he couldn't bring himself to turn the neighbor away. But his father refused to understand. Instead, he scolded Da Peng for being heartless, accusing him of abandoning his own family to help outsiders. He even complained that ever since Da Peng bought a car, he only drove villagers around and never helped his own family. Already seething over the cold treatment of his daughters, Da Peng finally snapped after being scolded by his father. He hurled insults back, saying his father didn't know how to be fair, declared that he would not drive his sister-in-law no matter what, and even called her a promiscuous woman. The argument ended with neither side willing to back down. The next morning, Da Peng drove his wife, children, and the neighbor into the city. Halfway there, he received a phone call from his sister-in-law. She demanded to know why he had called her a promiscuous woman and sneered that he was only lashing out because he was jealous that she had given birth to a son. Hearing those words, the fury that had been building inside Da Peng for years finally exploded. He suppressed his rage long enough to drop off his wife, children, and neighbor in the city, then immediately drove back to the village. He stormed into his younger brother's house, grabbed his brother's 3-year-old son, lifted the child high into the air, and threatened to smash him to death. The terrified child screamed in panic, and the sister-in-law fell to her knees, begging him to spare her son. Seeing her finally humbled and pleading, Zhu Dapeng slapped her once. Only then did he put the child down. But the story did not end there. Dapeng placed all the blame on his parents, believing that their indulgence was what had led to the situation he was in. In a fit of rage, he grabbed a knife from his younger brother's house and ran straight to his parents' home, intending to hack them to death. But when he arrived, no one was home. He shouted throughout the village but couldn't find them. With no other choice, he temporarily abandoned the plan. By then, Da Peng began to calm down. He realized that killing someone would mean going to prison. And that was when an even more horrifying thought formed in his mind. Before killing his father, he needed to take care of his wife and children first. What did he mean by take care of them? His plan was this. First, kill the eldest daughter whose paternity he doubted. Then give the younger daughter, whom he was certain was his biological child, to his mistress, Zhou Qin, to raise. Once he made up his mind, he prepared rope and sleeping pills and bought 3 blood-red suitcases to dispose of the bodies. On October 25th, while his wife was away working in Hangzhou, Da Peng made his move. He cooked porridge for his 2 daughters and secretly mixed sleeping pills into it. The eldest daughter ate the porridge, soon felt drowsy, and went to bed. The younger daughter didn't eat that bowl, so Da Peng patiently waited until she also fell asleep. In the early hours of October 26th, around 4 a.m., Da Peng acted. He used a nylon cord to strangle his eldest daughter while she slept. He then placed her body into the trunk of his taxi. Next, he took his 3-year-old younger daughter to Zhou Qin's home, hoping to leave the child with her. But Zhou Qin refused, saying the child had a mother and she could not keep her. After being rejected, and perhaps seeing the younger daughter as a burden as well, Da Peng lost all humanity. He took the child back home and strangled her with a rope. He also threw her body into the trunk. He then drove to the rural village of Zhuzhai and buried the bodies of both daughters beneath the ground on the family's residential land. Having done all this, Da Peng felt he no longer had anything holding him back and could finally kill his father without worry. He drove overnight back to Baishan village, more than 155 miles away. He parked his car on the road his father walked every day to school, knowing that around 7 a.m. each morning, his father would pass by. That would be the perfect chance to run him down. On the morning of October 27th, just after 7 a.m., his father appeared as expected. The moment he saw him, Da Peng slammed on the accelerator and drove straight at him. His father panicked and jumped onto the barrier in front of the school gate, narrowly escaping death. When he realized that the man who had just tried to run him over was his own son, Zhu Da Peng, the father immediately began shouting and cursing at him. Da Peng cursed back just as fiercely. The confrontation attracted a large crowd of curious onlookers. Seeing this, Da Peng understood that killing his father that day was impossible. He stopped arguing, got back in the car, and drove away. After murdering his 2 daughters, Da Peng received a phone call from his wife saying she had lost her job and was returning home. Afraid she would discover what had happened to the children and report him to the police, and recalling her earlier threat to ruin him publicly, his hatred surged again, and he decided to kill her as well. On December 18th, when his wife arrived home, Da Peng noticed she had caught a cold and wanted to take cold medicine. He seized the opportunity, crushed sleeping pills into powder, and secretly mixed them in. Completely unsuspecting, she took the medicine and quickly lost consciousness. Da Peng then used the same method as before, strangling her to death. After his wife died, thoughts of the supposed affair between her and his father filled Da Peng with rage that demanded release. He brutally dismembered her body, cutting off her breasts and genitalia. He then came up with the idea of writing a note that read, "The price of a promiscuous woman," to humiliate her. Even more horrifying, Da Peng cooked her breasts and genitalia until soft, and then ate them. According to him, only by doing this could he vent his anger and teach her a lesson. In the early morning of December 20th, around 6 a.m., Da Peng drove his taxi to Provincial Road 101 and dumped the suitcases and plastic bags containing his wife's remains by the roadside. He then went to see his mistress, Zhou Qin, for a final farewell before traveling alone to Shanghai, where he hid at a construction site and worked odd jobs in an attempt to evade capture. Even while on the run, he remembered that he still owed Zhou Qin 10,000 yuan, so he sent her a message. "I've been placed on a nationwide wanted list with a 50,000 yuan reward. In this lifetime, I won't be able to repay your kindness. The only thing I can do now is advise you to report me to the police, then you'll get the reward money. What shocked people the most was that after his arrest, during interrogation, Zhu Dapeng not only confessed in full to the brutal murders, but also admitted to another crime committed 9 years earlier. He had personally killed his sister-in-law, Kai Yanli. At the time, Yanli was not yet 18 years old. She had been staying at Dapeng's home while preparing to apply to a preschool teacher training program. Because she suffered from chronic menstrual pain, Dapeng often brewed herbal medicine for her and sometimes helped her study. Over time, he developed inappropriate feelings for the young woman. Under his manipulation, Yanli had sex with him and became pregnant. After becoming pregnant, Yanli wanted to marry Dapeng, but he refused. As her brother-in-law sleeping with his wife's younger sister was already humiliating enough, marrying her was unthinkable. Instead, he coaxed her, saying that after she finished school and reached marriage age, he would marry her. For now, he said, he would take her to get an abortion. Dapeng thought the matter was settled. But not long after, Yanli came back and demanded marriage again. He refused outright and angrily threatened her, warning that if she continued to harass him, she would force his hand. Yanli was not afraid. Instead, she declared that she would expose their scandal and destroy his reputation. Seeing her so defiant, Dapeng immediately decided to kill her and quickly carried it out. On the night of April 15, 1997, Dapeng secretly took rat poison from his home and poured it into Yanli's bowl of porridge. The poison acted quickly. After eating half the bowl, she collapsed unconscious. Dapeng pretended to panic and called neighbors to help take her to the hospital. But by the time they arrived, Yanli had already been dead for some time. After Yanli's death, because she had a history of chronic illness and showed no obvious signs of poisoning, and because Dapeng was widely seen as a caring brother-in-law, no one suspected him. Doctors only confirmed her death and declared it the result of sudden illness. In this way, Dapeng escaped legal punishment. As for his motive for killing Yanli, there is another explanation beyond his own account. After Dapeng was arrested, reporters interviewed him. According to their investigation, during the time Yanli stayed at his home, she had been raped by Dapeng and became pregnant. To cover up his crime, he poisoned her to death. Ultimately, after trial in the Anhui Provincial People's Court, the judge convicted Zhu Dapeng of intentional homicide and sentenced him to death. During the trial, when the judge asked if he had any final requests, Dapeng replied without emotion that he only wanted to see Zhou Qin one last time. The judge refused, stating only that Zhou Qin's recorded statement from the police station would be played for him. As for Zhou Qin, she was sentenced to 1.5 years in prison for concealing a crime. On the afternoon of February 3, 2008, Zhu Dapeng's death sentence was carried out. Regarding the mystery of the eldest daughter's paternity, after Dapeng was arrested, investigators exhumed the child's body and conducted DNA testing. The results showed that the eldest daughter was indeed Dapeng's biological child. But perhaps even if he had known the truth, Dapeng would not have felt any remorse, because his true motive was never betrayal. It was the extreme selfishness of a man who viewed his wife and children as obstacles on his path to a new life. His final words about his mistress, Zhou Qin, proved this point. "If she doesn't marry me, I will definitely kill her." In this case, the betrayal was imaginary. But if the situation were reversed, if a man truly witnessed his wife in another man's arms, would that justify murder? The next case will pose exactly that question. It is also a love-driven crime with shocking details, so don't turn off the video just yet. Late at night on September 1st, 2018, around 11:30 p.m., Mr. Chen, a sanitation worker in Jiangyu City, Sichuan Province, was doing his usual route, driving a garbage truck and collecting trash along the road. When he reached the Wuzhou agricultural section of the roadway, his eyes suddenly locked onto something lying face down in the middle of the street, completely motionless. Mr. Chen hurried out of the truck to see what it was. Up close, he realized it wasn't an object. It was a person. Because it was dark, he could only tell it was a male. But as he moved closer, he was horrified to see the man's entire body covered in blood. The man was wearing a shirt on top, but was completely naked from the waist down, and he wasn't moving at all. Terrified, Mr. Chen screamed and immediately called the police. His shouting drew nearby residents over to look. After receiving the report, the Jiangyu City Police quickly dispatched paramedics and officers to the scene. However, the emergency team arrived first and confirmed that the male victim was already dead. When police arrived, they dispersed the crowd and began processing the scene. During the search, officers discovered a second body, a female, in nearby bushes. Like the male victim, she was also partially naked, wearing clothing on top but nothing on the lower half. After transporting both bodies for examination, police returned to the scene to continue investigating. In the grass along the roadside, they found several rolls of toilet paper, but no identification documents or personal belongings that could confirm who the victims were. At that moment, a man who claimed to be a witness approached the police. His last name was Lee, and he lived right next to the scene. At around 11 p.m. that night, Lee was getting ready for bed when he heard violent fighting outside, along with a man shouting loudly in the local dialect, "Run! If you keep running, I'll chop you to death." Hearing that, Lee went outside to look. As soon as he reached the road, he saw a man holding a machete-like blade chasing another man and hacking at him. Too frightened to get close, Lee hid in the bushes and watched. It wasn't until Mr. Chen discovered the bodies and called the police that Lee dared to come out of hiding. Mr. Chen also provided another critical clue. When he arrived at the scene to sweep, he saw a man squatting beside the female body, smoking a cigarette. When the man noticed him, he shouted at Mr. Chen to go away. Already shaken by the sight of the male body, Mr. Chen quickly left. After that, the man got into a red car and drove away. Mr. Chen said the man looked to be in his early 30s, spoke the local dialect, and was likely a local resident. He didn't get a clear look at the license plate, but he was certain the car was red. At that point, Lee suddenly remembered another important detail. As the fight was coming to an end, a white SUV that had been parked in front of the scene was driven away by someone. Police immediately got into their vehicles to search. They soon found the white SUV, with its engine still running, on a side road about 1,000 feet from the scene. The driver was gone. When officers opened the door, a strong metallic smell of blood hit them. The back seat was soaked in blood, and in some areas the blood was still actively dripping. Inside the vehicle, police found a woman's handbag, a pair of women's sandals, a pair of men's athletic shoes, and a pair of women's underwear. Based on these traces, police concluded that this was likely the primary crime scene. The male and female victims had been having sex inside the car when they were discovered, and then attacked, stabbed, and slashed by the killer. Inside the vehicle, police found a driver's license and 2 national ID cards. The driver's license showed the vehicle owner was Ding Xiaofeng, 40 years old, a local resident. The female ID card listed Gu Xingxing, 31 years old, also a local resident. The forensic report showed that both Xiaofeng and Xingxing had more than 20 stab and slash wounds. Xiaofeng's injuries were concentrated on his back, while Xingxing was stabbed and slashed mainly in the chest and abdomen. Most shockingly, Xingxing's genital area had been severely stabbed and torn, and her face had been slashed so badly it was no longer recognizable. Police quickly tracked the red car through traffic surveillance cameras and identified its license plate. The owner was Wen Jihui, 37 years old, a local resident, and most importantly, he was the husband of the victim, Xingxing. Surveillance footage showed that Jihui did not attempt to flee. After leaving the scene, he drove straight home. At around 3 a.m. on September 2nd, police went to Jihui's house and arrested him. Facing the officers, the man who had just killed 2 people appeared unusually calm. However, during interrogation, he denied everything and claimed he had stayed home all day and never went out. Jihui's father also defended him, insisting his son was gentle and could never do something like this. Even after police advised him that a truthful confession could be considered for leniency, Jihui continued to deny the crime. Investigators were forced to change tactics. During a physical check, they discovered several fresh wounds on his neck and scratch marks on his arms. When confronted with this evidence, Jihui began to panic. After a long silence, he admitted that the clothes and shoes he had worn during the attack were upstairs. But when police found them, everything had already been washed clean. No visible traces remained. In the end, the forensics team found that the dash cam in Jihui's car, although old, had recorded the entire process of him killing the two victims. When Jihui was shown that video along with the other evidence, he fell completely silent. After a long time, he finally confessed and recounted everything that had happened. Jihui worked as a driving instructor at a local school. Unlike many hot-tempered instructors, he was known as a gentleman, patient, dedicated, always smiling, widely recognized as a good person. So what turned someone like that into a killer? It all began with the affair between his wife Xingxing and Xiaofeng. Jihui stated that he had accidentally discovered that his wife was unusually close to Xiaofeng. After looking into it and learning that Xiaofeng was already married, he didn't take it too seriously. Later, through his wife's introduction, he even became friends with Xiaofeng, and the three of them often went out to eat together. In fact, Jihui's friends had long noticed that Xiaofeng had feelings for Xingxing. But out of politeness and hesitation, no one spoke up. Jihui himself failed to notice anything unusual and continued to treat Xiaofeng like a brother. Gradually, Jihui began to notice that his wife was coming home late more and more often, and each time, Xiaofeng was the one driving her back. Suspicion began to grow. But because his wife was the primary breadwinner of the family, while he handled household matters and she earned the money, he chose to turn a blind eye. Even though he suspected infidelity, he had never witnessed it with his own eyes. This way of living continued for a long time. Many times he wanted to confront her and get to the truth. But when he thought about the fact that all financial control was in his wife's hands, his courage vanished. He kept reassuring himself that he was just being paranoid. Faced with the possibility of betrayal, Jihui showed the nature of a gentleman, preferring to doubt himself rather than expose the truth. On the day of the murders, Xingqing told her husband that she was going to have dinner at a friend's house in Mianyang and that he didn't need to save food for her. By 10 p.m., she still hadn't returned. Seeing that his parents and child were already asleep, Jihui decided to drive out to pick her up. Less than 1.25 miles after leaving home, he noticed a white SUV parked on a side road across the street. It looked very much like Xiaofeng's vehicle. He immediately turned the car around, drove closer, and confirmed that it was indeed Xiaofeng's SUV. Jihui's emotions became extremely conflicted. He wanted to rush over and demand answers, but he restrained himself. He thought to himself, "If my wife and Xiaofeng are both in the car, I'll divorce her tomorrow. If my wife isn't there, I'll greet Xiaofeng and go pick her up." He got out of his car and quietly approached the white SUV. When he saw a roll of toilet paper next to the car door, his male instinct told him something was very wrong. He yanked the car door open. What he saw was Xingxing sitting on top of Xiaofeng. The two were in the middle of having sex, moaning uncontrollably. When the door was suddenly opened, Xingxing panicked and scrambled off Xiaofeng without even having time to put her pants back on. Xiaofeng also hurriedly pulled his pants up. Seeing this scene, Jihui instantly understood everything. His wife had betrayed him, and had even sought excitement by having sex in a car near their home. Being betrayed right before his eyes, Jihui completely lost control and began punching Xiaofeng repeatedly. Xiaofeng fought back. Enduring the blows without even putting on his underwear, he reached into the back seat, grabbed a machete-like blade, and attempted to slash Jihui. That action fully ignited Jihui's rage. In a state of madness, Jihui struggled with Xiaofeng outside the vehicle. After several exchanges, he gained the upper hand, seized the blade, and hacked wildly at Xiaofeng. Xingxing stood nearby, frozen in terror. After a moment, she snapped out of it, opened the door on the other side of the SUV, and ran. Seeing his wife flee, Jihui, still in a frenzied state, immediately chased after her with the blade. Xingxing hadn't run far before she tripped over the roadside greenery and fell. Jihui caught up. Unable to escape, Xingxing broke down crying and begged for forgiveness, saying she knew she was wrong. But Jihui had completely lost all control. His eyes were bloodshot. He couldn't hear her pleas. He raised the blade and struck her repeatedly. Seeing her naked lower body, in a fit of rage, he stabbed directly into her genital area and then slashed her face twice. Meanwhile, Xiaofeng was still alive. Seeing Jihui run off, he crawled into the driver's seat and attempted to drive away. After killing Xingxing, Jihui noticed this and rushed after the vehicle. Catching up, he dragged Xiaofeng out of the SUV and stabbed him twice more in the chest. After everything was done, Jihui seemed to come out of his madness. He squatted on the ground, chain-smoking. After some time, he calmly drove home and washed all the blood-stained clothes and shoes clean. After finishing his account, Jihui appeared emotionally dead. He knew that killing 2 people meant he would have to pay with his life. What he didn't expect, however, was that outside the prison, many people were petitioning for leniency on his behalf, including his father-in-law, Xingxing's biological father. In the eyes of Xingxing's father and 488 villagers from Jihui's hometown, he was a good man. When they learned of the case, they were all willing to step forward to seek a reduced sentence for him. Not only did Xingxing's father refrain from demanding the death penalty for his son-in-law, but he also joined 488 villagers in signing and fingerprinting a petition, asking the court, on behalf of the entire village, young and old, to consider leniency for Jihui. As a simple, honest farmer, Xingxing's father understood that killing was wrong, but he still wanted to give Jihui a chance at redemption. He believed that in this case, responsibility did not lie solely with his son-in-law. His daughter, Xingxing, also bore fault and had been the one in the wrong first. Regardless of how the family felt or what they did, the fact remained unchanged. Jihui had killed 2 people. The law is impartial. In the end, after trial, Jihui was sentenced to death with a 2-year reprieve. In the end, 2 cases, 2 stories, but the same tragic outcome. Zhu Dapeng murdered his wife and children over a betrayal that never existed. Jihui killed his wife and her lover over a betrayal he witnessed with his own eyes. One was an illusion, the other was reality. But both led to the same destination: lives lost and irreversible sentences. The question worth reflecting on is this: if betrayal is false, can it ever justify taking another person's life? And if betrayal is real, does the pain give anyone the right to become a killer? The answer is no. Because when the blade comes down, it isn't only the victim who dies. The killer's future dies with them. So does the pain endured by those left behind, and the belief in love itself. Marriages can fall apart. People's hearts can change. But the law and basic morality never permit anyone to act as judge, jury, and executioner. That brings today's story to an end. What are your thoughts on these 2 cases? Leave a comment below and join the discussion with us. If you enjoyed this content, please remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you don't miss our latest uploads. Thank you for watching.